Hello mate, welcome back to the channel. So in this video we are going to be taking a look at the Ranger and designing and theory crafting a full Ascendancy class for Path of Exile 2. Let's get into it. So hopefully this video has come out just after you've watched the GGG livestream. Now, I have no idea right now as I'm recording this what happened in there, but obviously a week ago we got a teaser for the Ranger.
Danger lurks around every corner. What happened to my forest? Rollin! Freeze! Take this!
This video was so short, but it got me thinking. It's got this incredibly moody vibe in this dark forest, and it sort of got my mind whirring on, like, what would a dark ranger, something like a ranger that hunts at night or is, you know, born in the deep forest where the canopy's so thick that the sun barely pierces through. What could that person look like? What would that ranger ascendancy fantasy look like? And this is how we came up with the Duskstalker. Alright, so here is the tree as we can see here, and we've got a mixture of different stuff going on here. We've got 3 sort of double branches and then 3 single node branches that you can go to. And the themes for this were Stalk, Chill, Trap and Mark. So very much a traditional ranger, but we've got some interesting twists, and I think hopefully you're going to dig it. So to get us started, we're going to head down to the bottom on a pretty spicy node, something that I think is quite interesting. So on the way there, we get a 20% chance to fire an additional projectile, nice little proc-based thing, and a 8% attack speed increase. We'll pick that up, and then we get to Blade Tamer. Now, Blade Tamer, you can use your bow skills with daggers, and bow skills that use daggers instead fire 2 blades per projectile, dealing 45% of the damage. On the flip side, you can then also use dagger skills with your bow. So if you imagine you had like a dagger attached to the end of the bow, or, you know, the animation team can think of that. But your dagger skills have a 20% chance to then fire your main projectile skill. So you could do this where you had the projectile skill that was highest in your list, for example, something like that. You'd basically be able to select it. On top of that, we get a chance to cull whenever we're using either a dagger skill or a bow skill with our daggers. So just like really interesting off the bat. I love the idea that this, you know, the Duskstalker is this kind of character that's on the edge of battle. They're peering in, but when they need to strike and when it's time to strike, they can go in. And also this gives you, you know, the blade thrower fantasy if you wanted that as an option. So really, really cool. Love that. All right, let's move over to the left, and we're going to get our 20% increased blind effect and some defenses, just general defenses, because I didn't want to pigeonhole people to like evasion, armor, do what you want, right? All right, this node now, this is probably one of the most unique and interesting nodes, I think, in the kit that this class has got. When you strike a non-normal enemy, so that normal enemies won't trigger this, you're going to trigger Dusk for 6 seconds. It has a 24-second cooldown. Very temporary buff, so basically you've got this a quarter of the time. You gain 3 frenzy charges immediately whenever it's triggered, and then it gives you the following benefits. So enemies are blinded with 100% increased blind effect. Your movement speed can't be reduced below 100. You gain frenzy charges every second, and we've got to remember frenzy charge generation is probably going to be a lot trickier from what they've said. So this is actually quite powerful. This is like seen as a really powerful buff, but again, you only get it for a short amount of time, and we get those nice attack, cast, movement speed buffs per frenzy charge. Alright, and now we've got like ways that we want to try and sort of alter this. How can we further engage with this Dusk mechanic where basically when it activates, I'm imagining the screen goes a little bit darker, and maybe you get like a sort of glinty kind of highlight just around the enemies so that you can like still see them nice and clearly, but it's very obvious to you then that it's active. So if we wanted to improve this, we've got 2 options. Alright, the first is Dusk Dweller, and Dusk Dweller is our sort of defensive version of this duo node, the defensive option here. You're getting +3 maximum cold resistance and whilst Dusk is active, all of your other resistances are equal to your cold resistance. So as we know from PoE 1, this is an incredibly powerful effect, and this kind of mirrors what the Chieftain's able to get with their sort of fire resistance version of this, slightly. But again, it's a temporary buff. You're getting a 10% increased maximum chill effect, and all enemies are affected by maximum chill, regardless of whether they have like chill to immunity or like immunity to chill, or if they have some kind of reduction to chill. This is just going to pierce through that. It's giving you maximum chill on everyone whilst Dusk is active. On top of that, your damage over time, this idea of things being chilled in the night and sort of slower, your damage over time is going to be 50% slower. So during that, your regen is essentially going to be able to do a lot more for you. On top of that, we're getting the cooldown reduction from 24 seconds down to 18. So in theory, this is up a third of the time, but even further than that, Dusk now lasts 50% longer, taking it from 6 seconds to 9 seconds. So this is going to be, taking this node, this duo node, and enhancing it in this way with Dusk Dweller, is going to mean that it's up basically half of the time. And because of the way that it triggers off of when you hit a magic, rare, or unique enemy, if you're just killing white packs, then you don't need to worry about it. It's not going to trigger, and so you're actually getting a slight bias there as well. Just wanted to make that note. Alright, so the other side, we've got, I think, probably the one I would go for because I'm a bit of a melee Andy, is Dusk Strike. And Dusk Strike does some very different things. It's a much more offensive option, but it also enhances Dusk in different ways. So you're getting all the benefits you had before. This time, enemies take all damage as cold damage. So this is an important distinction. Taking damage as doesn't mean that you're converting your damage. We don't know how conversion is going to work, elemental conversion in PoE 2. Hopefully it's a bit simpler, just for me, because I can't sometimes get my head around it. But basically, they're going to be taking all of your damage as cold damage. Now, what's that going to allow you to do? Well, obviously, that's going to allow you to freeze more often, potentially. So, freezing a rare or unique enemy proliferates that freeze to all enemies within 8 meters. Melee strike skills gain 20% critical strike chance. This is base chance, and 200% critical strike multi. So, this is like, you're going Super Saiyan. As soon as Dusk hits, night falls, the enemies know they're in trouble, and specifically your melee skills have this bonus. Now, how do you, if you're at range and you're a Stalker and you're a Ranger, right? Well, how do you engage with them? All melee skills gain an option to instantly dash to the target within 5 meters. Now, this can be configured in the skill panel and let the designers sort of figure out how to implement that. But the idea is you can toggle this per skill, because someone rightly brought up that you could potentially get yourself killed if all of your melee skills instantly teleported you into someone. So you might not want that. On top of this, you also get that cooldown reduction. So you're not getting the lengthening, the 50% longer of Dusk, but you are getting it down to 18 seconds. So with 6-second uptime, you're kind of getting this a third of the time. Very powerful. All right, so we can flick those on. And then let's come over to the left here, and the namesake of this class, we're going to move over to the Stalker node. So the travel node for this one is you're getting some multi and you're getting some evasion rating. And this is cool because it's like stacks evasion rating based on how many rare or unique enemies are nearby. So that's kind of cool. And then we're coming over to Stalk, okay? And this was a really hard one to get my head around because you have to imagine it in the context of PoE 2. But stealth, in my mind, just as a preface, is this mechanic that basically you can go into stealth, and I imagine shadows and that kind of side of the tree will be making a lot of use of this. So this is sort of leaning up to that shadow area. But we're gaining stealth when we first confront a rare or unique enemy. So that's basically when we come into contact with them. Nothing has to happen. You just gain stealth when you're within 10 meters of them. You also gain stealth on killing a rare or unique. So we've got some ways to proc stealth here. Not all the time, but some ways to do it. And stealth is like, no one can see you, no one can attack you, basically. Maybe some enemies have like true sight. That would be cool. And that would be an interesting kind of option for GGG to play with. Attacking a rare or unique enemy from stealth deals double damage. So obviously really powerful. We're getting that initial hit, and then when we kill a rare, we then get another double damage. And maybe we've got some other ways to trigger stealth based on skills, right? All right. And I'm looking at the time because I'm like, I'm recording this and GGG Live is happening, but it's happening in like an hour and a half, so I don't know what I'm worried about. Anyway, back to the video. After hitting a rare or unique enemy at least once, if you are not hit by them for 6 seconds, then your next attack deals triple damage. This was, I think I love this idea. It leans into that tactical combat thing where we're getting these nice stealth buffs, but also if we're in combat actively, once we've engaged with a rare or unique, if we can manage to dodge them, and whether that's through evasion or that's through mechanical dodge rolling, and not get hit by them for 6 seconds, then we get this huge triple damage on our next hit. And so I was imagining scenarios where, you know, you jump in, you do a bit of damage, you're dancing around the boss trying to dodge them, and you see the counter coming up like 3, 4, and you're trying to get to 6, and as soon as you get to 6, you pull out, get some range, and then do maybe that huge charge up attack that we saw in the teaser for the Ranger. Something like that would be cool. Cool gameplay options. All right, so that's Stalk. So we've gone through basically half of the tree now almost. On the top left, we've got a slightly different take on this kind of Stalker, stalking, like from a range in stealth defensive options. So we're getting some evasion rating and maximum life, and then we've got natural camouflage. Gain a chance every second for enemies to lose sight of you for 2 seconds based on the distance you are to them. So this is really rewarding ranged gameplay, but it's a nice buff actually if you're in melee and you're dancing in and out. But if you're up to 8 meters and beyond away from them, every second you're getting a 40% chance for them to lose sight of you for a couple seconds. Now, what does lose sight mean, right? Lose sight is this idea I've got that basically to them you appear invisible. You are stealth to them. So the idea is you're kind of half stealthed, you're camouflaged, right? You're not entirely invisible. But if they just lose you in the heat of battle, then it takes them a couple of seconds to find you again. So for that 2 seconds, they're not attacking you. They're kind of in like an active search mode, basically, where they sort of know your position, but they can't quite attack you. That's the mechanical idea of how I imagine that playing. Enemies that have lost sight of you and currently have lost sight of you are intimidated with 50% increased effect. Now, intimidate gives them 10% more damage taken from you, and so this would take that up to 15% more damage taken. Really powerful, but again, it's only based on that if they've lost sight of you recently. So I think that's just like a really cool, really powerful idea. You could, if this was too strong mechanically, maybe you could nerf it a little bit. You could move it down to 1 second, or you could have bosses that it doesn't affect bosses, or it only affects bosses for 1 second, something like that. And then on the bottom, we've got a nice bit of evasion rating increase. And that is just that you're going to have this up a lot, but essentially if you're in a pack of quite a few monsters, one of them's probably going to have lost sight of you at some point recently. And so you're going to have a nice boost to your evasion rating. All right, let's tick that off. And then we're going to come over here, and this is like the mark branch now. So now we're going to be moving on to like the mark and trap branches. So we've kind of covered the stealth, and we've covered the dusk element, and now I wanted to do something fun with marks. This idea of like, I feel like a stalker, you know, that's like this hunter's mark thing. They 100% have this hunter's zenith on one particular enemy, and they are stalking them. So we get 25% increased effects of our marks, and we have 8% increased movement speed whilst we have a mark on an enemy. I think this was cool because I know in PoE 2 they don't want people to be zooming too much, and so this means that you have to be near enemies, at least near enough to put a mark on them, in order to get this 8% movement speed buff. Coming up to Stalker's Mark. The tagline for this is "Cripple a beast and it will soon surrender to its fate." I love writing these little thematic things on there sometimes. So enemies can have 2 marks on them at once. Instantly, huge win, really powerful. Like you could just this alone would make you want to take this node almost. But then I wanted to add some flavor and some like kind of like this idea of debuffing enemies and add a new mechanic into it that makes it feel even more unique for this Ascendancy. So applying a mark to an enemy permanently applies a random debuff to that enemy. Maximum permanent debuffs equals your maximum mark count. Okay, so we have 2 marks from this node, so we can instantly apply, if we apply 2 marks, they get 2 debuffs. Now the debuffs I've written on the bottom here is a bit small for you guys to see, include maim, blind, crushed, debilitate, and brittle. Obviously, brittle is a really nice one, very off meta because it's very hard to get that outside of like Secrets of Suffering and like very niche. If anyone doesn't know what that is, it's like very niche things to get that inside of PoE 1. And I just think it's like such a powerful effect, so it'd be really cool when you do get that, you know? And then on the bottom, marked enemies take 1% increased damage per second per mark on them. Now, sometimes when I'm making these, it's hard to understand how, if something is completely broken or completely underpowered. And I would love to be part of like a team that could discuss this and you sort of work it out and test it and stuff. But I'm not. I rely on you guys completely. So we might have to take that bottom line off, right, where they take the increased damage, because maybe the top two things are already powerful enough. Another mark can do a lot for you, and them having this debuff is already a massive boost, especially 2 debuffs. So anyway, maybe a bit of balance there, but super thematic. You're getting 2 marks, you're doing a lot of damage with your marks. All right, on to the next. If we want to enhance this a bit more, we get the same travel node just flips. So we get 25% increased mark effect, but then 8% reduced movement speed for enemies near a marked enemy. So again, we didn't want to double down on the movement, we're just slowing them down. And then this one, we've got pack prey. Alright, so upon killing a marked enemy, all nearby enemies now receive the same debuffs and increased damage taken from the marked prey that died. So this previous node where we're getting, you know, they're getting 2 random debuffs, and then we've built up this kind of stacking damage taken over time on them. This then transfers that to all the other enemies, again rewarding, like, you are hunting a very specific rare or unique, and if you do manage to target those first and take them out first, then the rest of the monsters should be a hell of a lot easier, or any nearby other rares or uniques. On top of that, upon dying, a marked enemy will pass its mark, so this is just a nice little quality of life thing, just passes the mark over. We get that in like masteries in PoE 1, and then we get some really nice leech, and so basically anyone that's affected by the marked prey debuffs, we're getting some leech from, and then we get some base leech immediately from marked enemies. Cool, so very powerful. Next up, I'm like, too powerful? I don't know. And then we've got some area of effect and 16% increased effect of ailments. This is our trap, sort of our trap. You'll see what I mean, but this is basically our trap branch. So the first one we're going to have a look at here is Ensnaring Trail. So you gain the Ensnaring Trail meta skill, and basically the meta skill works like every 4 meters that you move, you drop a socketed trap behind you. And so if you have multiple trap skills socketed into this meta skill, then it just rotates through them. Enemies affected by these traps are immobilized for 1 second. And then every second they have a 50% chance to be immobilized for a further second until basically it doesn't hit, right? Until the immobilized effect fails. So you could get scenarios where, you know, if you flip the coin and get heads a lot of time, you get lucky, then you could immobilize them up to 4 seconds, maybe up to 5 seconds, maybe up to 6 seconds. But some of them might only get immobilized for 1 second. I think this is kind of just a cool thing where it'll keep your gameplay actually interesting, because you don't know how long that enemy is immobilized for if they are chasing you and you're trying to get away. And obviously we can trigger other effects off of this, and we can support our traps however we want. Our trap skills are going to have their own effects that we can play around with. This is a nice quality of life kind of triggering thing. On the flip side of this, if you didn't want to go heavily into traps, what I wanted to do was offer a similar effect, but leaning back on the chill and cold side of things. So for this one, we've got Frigid Trail. What this does instead is, as you imagine, kind of like Arctic Armor, it leaves chilled ground behind you that lingers for 6 seconds. Shattering an enemy also creates chilled ground, basically around their corpse, and chill from chilled ground lingers for 3 seconds. So if they walk off that path, it's going to like linger on them for a little bit. And you also get 50% chance to freeze enemies that are on your chilled ground. And then we've got our last node, Propelled Mechanism. Similar to what we had with the Blade Tamer, where we're altering the way that skills like work and what weapons, because we know that skills are based around weapon types now. So that limits us, but then it's cool because then our ascendancies open up ways for us to then unlock new things. So here we will focus around daggers. Now this being the trap branch, we are getting Propelled Mechanism. So You can assign trap skills to be fired by a bow or crossbow. Trap throw speed is replaced by projectile speed, and traps will activate immediately upon final collision. So final collision means, you know, if you've got pierce or you've got chain, then it's going to be the last person it pierces or the last person in the chain that it reaches. These traps have a 25% chance to stick to an enemy and then rearm. And I just thought this was like... When I did the first part of this, I was thinking, oh yeah, okay, that's really cool. Like, we can fire our traps. Like, it makes sense. And I'd seen in Last Epoch, someone had like, I haven't actually played it myself, so I'm not sure how it works, but I remember someone discussing, it was on a podcast. It was the Beyond the Atlas podcast. That a few guys like Swingy, Ice Cold Snake, Talkative Try, and All Trades Jack do. And they were having a good chat about Last Epoch, and it came up that you can like convert your traps into sort of like detonating arrows or something. And I was like, that is sick. Like, imagine you had a meta skill or like a way that you could trigger that. So this then basically unlocks that so that you can assign trap skills to a bow or crossbow in the weapon slots. On top of that though, I was like, there's got to be something else to it. It just didn't feel quite as powerful, and certainly didn't feel as powerful as the Blade Tamer node for daggers. And so I thought, yeah, why not give it like a 25% chance? This is essentially like a 25% more damage multiplier. But it's also like the cool interactions and effects that you can get from re-triggering. Like maybe you're doing poisons, and so this is also like stacking like more poisons, and maybe the more poisons you have are dealing, you know, is like reducing some other effect. And it's all these, what do they call it? What did Quinn always bang on about? Like the combinatorics or something, I don't know. That was my terrible impression at an Australian accent, apparently. But yeah, this is like a cool thing that you can like get to fire them, and then obviously it gives you a chance to rearm and get all those trigger effects as well. So I guess like what I've done sometimes in these videos, which is fun, is to sort of like, if I just untick all these, and then I can kind of like just imagine a couple of sort of like build examples or something that we might get, you know, like that we might be able to put together. And this is one of the benefits of having like 9 nodes, where I've try and always put 9 nodes in, because I feel like you can get a lot of different builds out of one Ascendancy that like is all in one theme. So for me, I'm just going to do my first thing that like I would do with this, because I love dagger gameplay and I love all that stuff, but I also love like cold, that like Sub-Zero was like my guy in Mortal Kombat. I love cold stuff, and I love the cold Ranger fantasy as well. So for me, I would definitely lean into some of the dagger stuff. So I would probably become like, you know, instantly take Blade Tamer and become a dagger thrower. So say we've got barrage, right? Well, now we're firing twice as many projectiles as daggers. I mean, they're doing like, you know, just under half the damage, but we're getting cull, and then we can trigger really cool things off of having that many hits or projectiles. And then it also gives you, you know, a chance to then, if you do want to get up close and you've got a bow, you can use some dagger skills and maybe like fire like a point blank style thing into them. Assign point blank, there's some cool stuff, who knows. I would then definitely pick up Dusk. I think this is just just out of curiosity, I think, but this idea of like a Nightblade, you know, and I would definitely pick up Dusk. You're getting like a ton of frenzy charges. We know that these are going to try and be like much more about empowering skills and triggering effects on skills. So I'm sure there's going to be some interesting dagger stuff to do with frenzies. Get like, you know, try and craft a couple of amazing daggers with some cold damage. Vibes. Okay, and you know, on top of that, we're getting blind, so we'd probably stack evasion. And then, sorry, this screen is like, the text is so small, so I'm trying to work out. Oh, I see, that's because I'm not zoomed in. Let's zoom back in. There we go. All right, and yeah, we're getting blind, and then also we're just getting like all the movement and attack speed stuff. Definitely get that. And I think this is where I think it would be tough, to be honest with you, actually, because this is such a powerful node, especially if you're in combat and in melee. Like that action speed slow would be just incredible, like defensively. Maybe that's my hardcore option. I think that's my hardcore option. However, of course, if we're leaning into this Nightblade thing, then I'm getting Dusk Strike. This idea that you can like just, for the melee skills that don't have inherent range, and I imagine we'll see a lot more skills that don't have range like that. because they're obviously trying to make melee feel more melee, and you can switch so you're not stuck in melee. So the idea of having like, you know, Cleave of Rage that's like covering the whole screen just seems a bit out of place in PoE 2. So having that like dash, that 5 meter teleport during this period, I just think is sick. And like waiting for night to hit to then target the rares, or you know, like you clearing the fodder, and maybe you're clearing the fodder at range, but then as soon as night hits, you go in and you're teleporting in and you're doing those that dagger damage. Obviously the fact that they take cold damage as well, and you have a chance to freeze, all very, very cool stuff. Alright, so that's my, I guess now I've taken my 3 nodes, and now I'm thinking, okay, I've got like, you know, an interesting mechanical thing here, I've got some utility, I've got damage, now I probably want some defense. And this is where I think there's like interesting options, because I could lean more into the cold stuff and pick up Frigid Trail. But really that's like, if I'm going to be in melee a lot, I'm planning on not running away too much. I could potentially pick up 2 marks. I'm debuffing the enemies quite a lot, and on top of that, my 2 marks could be doing stuff, you know, we don't know what marks are going to be in the game, but they could be giving me life leech or life on hit. They could be like enfeebling the target. That seems really powerful. Camouflage is one of those things where it's not as strong when you're in melee, and if we're planning on being in melee a lot, then I don't think that's probably the best option for us. Stealth, we've got Dusk, and I feel like we're not trying to actually lean too much into like a stealth gameplay here. You definitely could, but again, I don't want to do that. So I think actually we're going to pick up Stalker's Mark. We're going to hope that we get some really nice like debuffs triggering. We've got Brittle, which is going to potentially in the pool, which could trigger, and that's going to give us a load of crit. I would love to be able to pick up the Pack Prey element, but you know, this maybe it's just been more of a single rare boss killing kind of thing. We're focusing on that one target that we really want to take down. Alright, so that is like, you know, let's say that's our sort of melee, Nightblade, Duskblade. Yeah, let's go with Duskblade, that's cool, that sounds good. Duskblade build. Now let's do something that is like, I'm going to do like the Ranger fantasy thing and go into like the actual namesake of the class, I guess, and we'll do Stalker. So straight away, let's pick up Stalker. Or Stalk. And this is giving us stealth, it's giving us like tons of defensive just inherently in that we're getting to choose when we engage, when there's a rare around, and then also allowing us to kind of kill the rare and duck out. I just like, this is cool, this is what the class is all about. And then of course we get that massive damage potential as well. So very, very cool. I think then definitely we're gonna come pick up Ensnaring Trail. This just instantly gives us tons of utility with traps and loads of defensive options mechanically in terms of as we're moving away and we're moving. So it makes our positioning matter. It makes every time that we're moving, we're thinking about, we're going to get probably a really good idea of when our traps are going to drop and when we've moved 4 meters. Yeah, and this obviously immobilizing them, amazing, perfect for range. Now I've got an interesting one, because do I want to pick up trap propulsion? And I think this obviously is probably more of a niche thing, because you would then start building into like trap damage and crafting amazing traps, and you're basically a trap build, but you're allowed to like fling them, you know. Very cool. I think that's definitely its own build type though. So I think for this one, we will come up and pick Natural Camouflage. And for obvious reasons, right? Like, this is super defensive. Actually, I'd say this is probably the hardcore choice, because next up, I think we would probably pick up the Stalker's Mark again. But if I was playing softcore, I probably wouldn't stress too much about this defense. And even though there's some offense in it as well, of course. But I just think thematically, interestingly, it'd be really powerful to double down on these marks, build tons and tons of mark effect, maybe get a quiver or something that has like mark effect on it, and we don't know what's going to be in the game. And then pick up Pack Prey. And obviously just get the quality of life, our marks passing around, so we're not worried about getting in to recast them or anything. The debuffs going to every enemy is getting that debuff, and you know, that in of itself is just huge. But then obviously the leech, you know, the leech is incredibly useful, and at range we can then, you know, focus on, if we're thinking about the passive skill tree, once we picked up that leech and stuff, you know, leech I imagine is going to be quite powerful, and I've kind of scaled this imagining that leech is going to be incredibly powerful. Like, I don't think we're going to have as much leech on the passive tree because of the way they've described the new mechanics of it working. It's essentially a lot more simple, and I feel like the reason they made it complicated in the past was to try and limit its abuse. So I think we're going to see a huge numbers decrease on leech. So yeah, I think that's incredibly powerful, and we can focus on recovery elsewhere. You know, those points we would have assigned, we can put into other things, like damage. Alright, so that is the tree, that is the Duskstalker. I hope you've enjoyed it. I think it's thematic. I hope you guys are super hyped, having just watched GGG live, I imagine. And I have no idea, obviously, like I said earlier, what's come out in that. Maybe that just makes all of the stuff I've put in this redundant. But I was just so inspired after seeing the Ranger teaser, and it got me thinking, and I just wanted to put something together. So had a lot of fun doing it, as always. Thank you so much if you're still watching at this point in the video. I see you, I appreciate you, and I guess, yeah, we've got some more coming up. We've got a collab coming up with Try, which is going to be fun, where we're doing some more Ascendancy stuff. It's going to be the Druid and the Sorcerer, and I've got some interesting ideas for both, so we'll see what happens. We're still working on our huge Incursion 2.0 League video, so that's going to be coming out, but it's turning out to be a lot. And yeah, we're just going to keep making stuff. I'm sure we've got tons of stuff to discuss now that we've had some information out and the embargoes lift, and all the creators are now putting their content out, hopefully. Alright, it's been fun. Friends, exiles, thank you so much for watching. Ta-da.